Hello, everyone, and welcome to the April homeowner webinar for Florida Friendly Landscaping. My name is Claire Mitchell, and hold on just a second. We are so happy to have everybody here, and I'm going to go ahead and ask a little icebreaker question for the chat. I am wondering, how do you water your landscape? Do you have an automatic irrigation system? Do you water by hand or maybe just with one of those sprinklers like that? Or do you rely on rainfall or micro irrigation? So I'm just curious, how do you irrigate your landscape? All right, we got an irrigation system here. And then is it on an automatic system, like on a timer that turns on um, whether or not you set it? That's the follow-up question. I have in my yard, I have automatic system for my micro irrigation, but it's just for vegetable beds. So, all right, what else do we have here? We have rainfall, soaker hose during extreme drought. All right, ooh, rain barrels. I like that. Is the echo better, everybody? We did have, let me know if the echo is better, and we'll hopefully that should be better. All right, we got an automatic system set for twice a week for the lawn. So I'm curious to see, is your water management district cutting back irrigation to once a week for the drought? Because I think we are in where I am in Alachua County. All right, we've got watering by hand, set for once a week. That's what I like to see. Okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and get started. I think y'all, I'm just giving everybody a little chance to enter the webinar. Oh, okay, we got all mulch and natives. I like to see that in a rain barrel. Sorry, I had to say that last one. Um, as I said, my name is Claire Mitchell. I am the education manager for Florida Friendly Landscaping. And this is the homeowner webinar. This is a monthly series given every third Tuesday of the month at 11 a.m. So today we have Laura Vasquez, who is here to speak with us about using our automatic irrigation system. And this is one of these technical topics that is so important, and we are so happy to have Laura here to help explain this to us because this is one of the best ways that we can conserve water. First of all, your microphones have been muted. If you have any questions, you can type them in the Q&A box because the chat box is going to be closing. We will answer any questions at the end of the presentation, so please stick around. And then at the end, we will have an exit survey, so that kind of gives me an idea of the kind of programming you like and lets us know how we're doing. Our next webinar will be May 19th at 11 a.m. and we will be joined by Mark Hostetler, an extension specialist in the Department of Wildlife Ecology and Conservation, and he'll be talking to us about how to attract more birds to your landscape. So today we are talking with Laura Vasquez. She is the Urban Horticulture Extension Agent in Miami-Dade County, specializing in residential irrigation and water efficient landscape practices. She provides research-based education on irrigation system design, scheduling, maintenance to help homeowners and professionals conserve water while maintaining healthy Florida-friendly landscapes. So Laura, thank you so much for joining us and take it away.
Well, thank you, Claire. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for Zooming in today. As Claire mentioned, my name is Laura. And if you are participating today, then you probably joined us through the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. And as you know, UF-IFAS provides a research-based, non-biased information. And today we're going to be looking at our irrigation systems in Florida. So as I mentioned, as you know, this webinar is hosted by the Florida Friendly Landscaping Program. And if you're familiar with the program, you should be familiar with these 9 principles. Today, we're going to focus on principle number 2, which is watering efficiently. We will touch a little bit on principle number 1 and also principle number 8 because they are relevant to watering efficiently in a few of the slides that we will review today. So I know I can't see your responses in the question and answer, but I will be able to see that later after the presentation. So I want you to think about something, right? Overall, Florida is known for its warm and sunny weather. If you are a transplant from to South Florida, what made you move here? Was it the weather? Was it the climate? Was this something that you were expecting to have, a tropical, lush landscape? What were the reasoning for you to move to South Florida? That's a question that, it would be great to kind of see, why people moved here. A lot of people do move here because of the weather, but they don't realize, and like this presentation is for the entire state, that in the North, Central, and South Florida, you can maintain a very lush landscape without so many inputs, but the climates are very different throughout the state. So that's important, following the 9 principles, but specifically for your areas. Now, why is this an issue, or why is it an issue that we have so many people moving to Florida? Well, one of the largest issues that we are facing is the overpopulation. It's a pattern that's happening throughout the entire state. I'm gonna focus a little bit on Miami-Dade just for a minute because I am from Miami-Dade, or that's where I teach predominantly. And it's because we are also on the top of the list of the most populated county in the state. We have 2.7 million people that live in Miami-Dade County. We are the 7th most populated county in the United States. So we have a lot of residents. Here in this map, you can see where Miami-Dade is, kind of right up to the Everglades National Park line. And so I don't know how many of you are familiar with Robert is here. That he was surrounded by agriculture. He used to sell fruits on the corner of his father's property. You would take the road down there going to Everglades National Park, and now there are apartment buildings across the street from his property. If you want to scan this QR code here, I provided it there. This information is generated by 1,000 Friends of Florida. And if you scan it, you can get information about your area in particular. So it's really important, for us to take a look at the overpopulation because, with more residents comes more development, comes more landscapes, more irrigation, and there's less area for us to generate or to regenerate our aquifer. So, because overpopulation is an issue, it's also causing, besides the stress and congestion that it's causing, having all, the overpopulation. Now here in Miami-Dade, we say Miami is an hour from Miami because that's how long it takes you to get from one place to another. There's a lot of issues with water. And so through the state of Florida, we have 3 different types of aquifer, and they vary in combinations throughout the state. So, the Floridian aquifer system underlines most of Florida and is the main source of potable groundwater for much of the state. However, if you look at the panhandle up here and you look at South Florida down here, we do depend on different aquifers because the Floridian aquifer is either too deep or contains a high concentration of salt. So we do have access to different aquifers, which is important, especially in Miami-Dade, because like I mentioned, we have about 2.7 million people just in Miami-Dade, and this aquifer also feeds part of Palm Beach, Broward, Monroe County, and we also send water to Miami Beach as well. So in addition to this, the other issues that we're facing, as you may or may not be aware, is, sea level rise, climate change, drought. We have droughts, we have flooding, and saltwater intrusion. But then you're going to say, look, Laura, the slide says it's, it rains about 50 to 60 inches of rainfall each year. So why do we need irrigation? If you guys can answer that in the chat, why do we need irrigation if we have so much water or so much rain throughout the year? And truly, in Florida, we don't have 4 seasons. We don't have spring, summer, fall, winter. We have 2 seasons. We have wet season and dry season. And because of that, this is why we need irrigation. If you look at this chart, you can see that rainfall is in blue and evapotranspiration is in orange. So that's, the evaporation of water. And if you're looking at April, look at our rainfall. Of course, it's our driest month. and it's really hot. The evapotranspiration rate is really high. And as we move into rainy season, you can see May, June, July, the rain is really, it's coming down. And this is kind of when we have most of our water in May through October. But if you look, let's look at June. This small part on the top of the blue area is our effective water. This is the water that's really getting to our plants and our landscape. It's not much. Though it is raining a lot, the evapotranspiration rate is just as high, which is why sometimes we need the supplemental irrigation. Now, why irrigation management matters in Florida? Because outdoor irrigation is our major use. Automatic systems often overwater. Water is wasted, through landscapes and our waterways. If you look at this chart here, in Miami-Dade, our outdoor water use is about 50%, though throughout the state, it's stated that it's 40 to 60%. But in Miami-Dade, it is actually 50. So these systems do tend to overwater at times, and it makes it harder to manage your landscape. It causes more issues when you're not managing your irrigation system properly, and it contributes to nutrient leaching and runoff and plant diseases. So today we're going to go through some of the parts of an irrigation system, not all of them, so don't get scared. You're not going to know how to install an entire system today, but we're going to go over some of these. So we have your controller, your pipes, valves and zones, your sprinkler heads, your weather devices, which could include a smart controller, a rain sensor, a soil moisture sensor. You have a backflow prevention device and an irrigation submeter. Today we're going to focus more on your timers, your valves, some sprinkler heads, some weather devices and your backflow prevention device. We're not going to go too much into submeters and your pipes and things like that. So looking at your timers at home, for those of you that do have irrigation systems, these might be the ones that you typically have, or the ones we typically see out when we're conducting assessments. We still do see some mechanical systems out in the field, like this timer on the right-hand side that has the little yellow sundial. Each of these pins accounts for 12 minutes. So here you can see they have 24 minutes scheduled for their first zone. There's a break, then they have another 24, and then there's a break. These breaks allow the indexing valve to turn, and I'll show you an indexing valve in a second. And then here's where they program their date and time, their date for their date wheel. Now, for a digital timer, for those of you that have these at home, what's important with these digital timers is that you can program them for multiple start times. So if you see here, there's a program A, B, and C. And this is at times where we use the most water because we don't realize that we have multiple start times on your timer. This may be something that you guys can check after our talk today. Because the rainy season is coming up, it's time to check your controllers and make sure everything's going to be set properly for the rainy season. And so I would check your A, B, and C. Typically when we go out in the field, we check these because homeowners are not aware that they have multiple start times. So if you're on program A and it starts at 4 o'clock, you may have a program B and then you started at 6 and the timer is going to go through the cycle again. So it's very important to check that. And also on the blue your blue marks here, those are your different zones, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3. And then you would schedule those according to the plant material you have in each zone. So we'll go through that a little bit later in our talk. Now, as I mentioned, this indexing valve, you have your mechanical timer, and your mechanical timers typically have an indexing valve like this one here. So what happens is inside, once you hit that break, so like I mentioned before, it has 12, 24 minutes, and then there's a space. When that space hits, the system, it goes off, and then when it turns on again, this little guy makes a turn inside and it goes to the next zone. So what happens with these timers is that they're not very efficient because you can't really control what zone is going to come on next. Sometimes these indexing valves tend to get stuck and they may be turning on the same zone over and over and you may not be aware. And now with these type of controllers, we have seen the switch to digital, if not digital, smart. So we'll go into smart controllers a little bit later. But if you have this controller, a digital timer, you need electrical valves. So each one of these pipes here, it looks like there's 3 or 4 on this irrigation system. You would need either 3 or 4 of these electrical valves that would take place of these different pipes. Why are electrical valves more user-friendly? Because you can program each zone specifically, not by 12-minute intervals like this controller, but you can put it down to the minute. You can say, I only want to water this particular zone for 2 minutes, for 10 minutes, for 15 minutes. It gives you the ability to adjust the watering down to a minute. Additionally, as we know, in Florida, we have a lot of lightning strikes, and sometimes the timers will go out, and you can still turn on your irrigation system manually by using your solenoid valve right here. You can turn this, and that particular zone will come on. So that's another added benefit. Now, we're going to go a little bit into sprinklers. So take a look at this slide, because we're going to revisit this slide in a minute when we finish talking a little bit more about sprinklers. So this is your rotor sprinkler. I'm going to talk about 1/2 inch application rates, applying 1/2 inch, because the University of Florida recommends that you should be applying 1/2 inch of water every time you irrigate. So how many times are we allowed to water per week? 2 times. I hope everybody knows that. And in each time you should be watering 1/2 inch. So these rotors will give you 1/2 inch in about 50 to 75 minutes. They are, made to cover turf areas. They do apply water a little bit more slowly, and they apply water in gallons per minute. Now, I want you to pay attention to the minutes of how long this takes to put down that 1/2 inch. If you're looking at sprinklers or sprays, to put down 1/2 inch, these take about 15 to 25 minutes. They're used for smaller areas. They do have some problem with the wind, because if they come up, later in the day or later in the morning, then if we have too much wind, a lot of the water either evaporates, or it's not watering the area that it should be. And these also water in gallons per minute. Now, your multi-stream nozzle, or your MPRs, we call these MPRs, these apply water similar to a rotor. So that 1/2 inch, it would give it to you in about 50 to 75 minutes. They perform more efficiently with low pressure systems. You have less deflection of the wind because of the patterns here in the spray. And it also sprays in gallons per minute. Now, we see some of these in bedding plants. I see them a lot in fruit groves and things like that. They do use them in orchids and landscapes, but we would recommend these for either your potted plants or some bedding areas that you may need water. The micro sprays, to give you 1/2 inch, they take about 30 to 50 minutes. They are more efficient than your regular sprays, because they're watering directly to the plant and directly at the plant where you have it located. The only problem with these is that it's important to pay attention that these are not gallons per minute. These micro sprays will give you gallons per hour. So that's important when you have different types of heads in a particular zone, because they're giving you different amounts of water. A lot of drip as well. Drip gives you gallons per hour. Drip is most efficient because it's applying water right to the roots of the plants. It does have issues with clogging. Down here, we do use a lot of well water, and the well water does have calcium buildup. There are electrical valves that have filters, so you can add a filter, or you can, do some maintenance with these drip systems by opening the end of the drip, running the zone, which will allow to clear out that particular zone, and it'll help you reduce the clogging. Drip irrigation is used most for temporary irrigation, not permanent irrigation. And again, it applies water in gallons per hour instead of gallons per minute. So this is very important for you guys to understand. Also, drip and soaker hosers. Typically I do this in person so I can get a little bit of feedback, but maybe you can put it in the chat. What do you think is the difference between a drip and a soaker system? If you guys can add that in the chat, we'll look at your responses after. But a soaker hose is used mostly for low pressure irrigation, like for your rain barrels or your outdoor faucets, whereas your drip is, mainly used for higher pressure in an irrigation system. The soaker hoses do tend to sweat along the line, so the more pressure you have, the more water it's going to release. And here, your drip system is going to apply directly to your roots. Now, based on what we talked about in the gallons per minute, gallons per hour on these different types of sprinklers, what do you think is wrong with this photo? So I'm going to give you guys a couple minutes or just like a minute or so to reply in the chat. What do you see wrong with this photo when we discussed the application rates of these different sprinklers to give us half an inch? As I mentioned, your rotors take about 50 to 75 minutes to put down a half an inch. These sprays only take about 15 minutes. And so if you have these in the same zone, you don't have the same application rate. What the areas where your plants are, or these areas are going to get double the water than the areas with the rotors. So here's another review question. What is the biggest difference between your drip systems and your soaker hose and your sprays? I know we talked about it a little bit, so I want to see if you guys are getting that in the chat. What is the biggest difference in application with your drip, soaker hose, sprays, and rotors and your multi-streams? So the biggest difference there is that the drip and soaker hose apply in gallons per hour, and your sprays and rotors and the multi-stream nozzles apply in gallons per minute. Now, so moving on a little bit to principle number 1, which I mentioned we would discuss. When you're planning your irrigation system, what are you planning it for? You're planning it for your plants, and it's accompanying your plants, and they're there to help you water and make sure that your plants are healthy. So you should, again, have the right plant in the right place, but also have the right irrigation for the right plants. So typically grass needs a lot more water than your plants. So if you're gonna have your grass, it should only have your rotors. And if you're gonna have your planted areas, you should only have either sprays, or to fix the unbalance, as we mentioned, I talked about how you don't have balance application if you have rotors and sprays in the same zone. You could replace your spray heads with the multi-stream nozzles to give you a better application rate. So that's a way to fix that. But you also want to design your landscape with the irrigation system that you have, because you want to group your plants according to their water needs, which is based on their hydro zones. Now, yes, some areas are hard to irrigate without overspray, so it's difficult to get the perfect pattern. So consider those areas that are difficult to apply irrigation, maybe using native plants, like in this area, or Florida-friendly plants. Here on this picture, this is the Lowe's here in Homestead. I was really surprised and happy to see the landscape design here. This is perennial peanut, and it is difficult to water in this area, so they decided to put very drought tolerant plants. So it's important also, like in these medians, to maybe use drip irrigation instead of sprays when possible, so that you don't have the runoff of the irrigation. Now, sprinkler spacing is also important. The University of Florida recommends that you space your sprinklers in order for them to have head-to-head coverage, either in a triangular or square coverage. So you want to make sure that the water from this sprinkler is reaching this one, and the water from this one is reaching the other. So you have this area of overlap, because that will provide a match application rate throughout the zone if you have the same heads with the same gallons per minute throughout the zone. Sometimes, you find, that one of these breaks, one of your sprinkler heads breaks, and you have one in the garage, and you said, oh, well, I'm going to put this here for now. And unfortunately, it doesn't match the gallons per minute of these other heads. And so you're going to create a mixed application rate. You're not going to have the same rate throughout, which is not going to give you uniformity throughout your system. So here's a little, just a quick shot of uniformity, what we're looking for. So we're looking for adequate irrigation. We want to make sure that our roots have the water that they need to take up. Sometimes you will have this issue where there will be, your plants that have plenty of water, and then one or two that are drying out, or you may see like a dry spot in your landscape and you're not sure why. Well, it could be bad design. It could be that There's no head-to-head coverage in this area, which is why, you have this dry spot. You have different, the sprinklers are reaching different lengths. For example, we have sprinklers that can give you water up to 5 feet, some that can give you water up to 10 feet. So it's important to not only look at the gallons per minute, but also the reach of each particular sprinkler. It could also be a issue with pressure. Sometimes if the pressure is low in the line, you will have dry spots in your landscape. And so the pressure that you have in the beginning of your line is not going to be the same pressure that you have at the end of the line, because as you're adding sprinklers, the pressure reduces in that particular line. Well, the good thing is that there are pressure regulated bodies. So these spray heads or these spray bodies are pressure regulated, and they are certified by the EPA. And what they do is they control the pressure throughout the zone to give you a better application rate in that zone, so that the pressure you have in the beginning of the line will also be the same pressure you have at the end, which then means if you have the same types of sprinklers, then they're all going to apply the same amount of water throughout that particular zone. Uniformity issues could also be because of maintenance. Here's another question for you. What do you think a homeowner will do if they see a dry spot in their landscape? You see this little dry spot here? What do you think a homeowner would do? If you guys are here, you guys are maybe a little familiar with the Florida friendly landscaping principles. So you may not do what a typical homeowner would do, but what do you think a homeowner would do if they were to see a dry spot? I'll give you a few seconds to answer that in the chat. And the issue could be maintenance. Maybe it's not any issue with the timing of your watering or the spacing. It could also be maintenance. It could be that, either your landscaper or you are riding your lawnmower and there's a sprinkler head popped up and it didn't go all the way down. And instead of getting off the mower, you're going to say, well, it's not going to harm if I just kind of go over it. And then what happens is that the sprinklers start to lean, like in this photo on the left-hand side, and it's not reaching the area that it typically would reach. So it could be also a maintenance issue. Now we keep talking about this 1/2 inch, and why is this 1/2 inch important? Well, the university recommends, this 1/2 inch when you're seeing 30 to 50% of your turf showing signs of wilt. And if you water any more than that through these events, then you're going to be losing a lot of your water to leaching, depending on your on your soil. So it's very important that you also check the type of soil you have. Here in Homestead, we have very loamy, rocky soil. So I am not going to program my timer here in Homestead like I would in Miami Beach or in some areas in the north, or even east of us in Cutler Bay, which I typically call Soggy Bay because it doesn't drain very much. So it's very important that you need to see the type of soil you have so that you know how long it's going to take to apply that 1/2 inch without allowing the water to leach through the ground. Now you would question, Laura, how do I know? How do I know how much, how often or how long I need to run my zone to get that 1/2 inch? So here are a few ways that you can determine that. You could use the fawn weather station. If you have a regular digital timer and you don't want to upgrade to a smart controller, you can go to the fawn weather station and it can tell you, the application or how much it's rained in your area so that you don't have to run your system. And so that way it can generate kind of baselines of how often you need to run it. Smart controllers, which we'll talk about, can also help you generate that information. This turf app, I will be honest with you, I checked this link and there are applications for crops, but I no longer see this turf app there listed. So I'm going to have to call and find out why this turf app is no longer available. You can determine it by a quick catch can test, which we'll talk about, soil moisture sensors, rain sensors. And so we'll go a little bit into those at this moment. So catch cans for uniformity. You could even use, you don't need to buy these, types of containers. If you have cats, if you like tuna, you can recycle your little tuna cans and you can place them out between 4 sprinklers or 2 sprinklers. You're going to run that particular zone for about 15 minutes. Then you're going to go and measure each one of these containers with your ruler. and you're going to measure, and let's say you get half an inch here, half an inch the next one, and as you're getting closer to the other sprinklers, you're noticing it's increasing to an inch, and then it goes higher. So that will show you whether you have a problem with uniformity in that zone, why you're getting, why are we getting more water, less water in the beginning than at the end? It could be spacing, maintenance, pressure, all those reasons we talked about uniformity. But let's say that you do have great uniformity and you have half an inch in each one of these cans. If you have that half an inch in 15 minutes, then you know that that zone should only run for that 15 minutes. Okay. And if you look at this photo on the right, you can see me here somewhere. I'm going to put that in the chat if you see me. I was here 19 years old, conducting catch can tests with AmeriCorps. So I've been doing this for a little bit of time. But we were also assessing not only urban areas, but agriculture areas like nurseries and row crops. So I used to be with the mobile irrigation lab. That lab is still around. Luckily, a lot of these programs are now moving over to the extension office, which is great, so that we're partnering the UF research with these different mobile irrigation labs. Now, runoff in Florida. So yes, we have the amount, Laura, you say, Laura, I have the half an inch that I need, but I still see runoff. Like I mentioned before, soil is very important. If you look at this tree in this median, there's not much space here. Having irrigation here is really difficult because the roots of the tree are already struggling for room. They have liriope as well here, which is fighting for nutrients in the soil and room. And then you have irrigation, and so all of that is running off because the soil doesn't have capacity to hold all of that material, the roots, the water. And so it's important that, we don't overwater so we don't have runoff, and again, the leaching. Here with these sprinklers, they're all overspraying, it's all running down the sidewalk. Maybe using different types of heads here so that you don't have the overspray. Multi-stream nozzles would do great here. So those are different options that you may have. So it's important that your application rate does not exceed the maximum ability of your soil to absorb water. Again, that's why I mentioned soils are important. I'm not going to run my timer here in Homestead for 30 minutes when I can get that half an inch that soil can really hold in like 10, 15 minutes. So moving on to weather devices. So there is a statute, a Florida statute 373.62, and it does require you to have a rain shutoff device. It doesn't have to be a rain sensor, but it has to be some type of device to shut off your system. Now, there's a lot of back and forth whether, these smart controllers or ET controllers can or can we use those as a rain shutoff device? And I will tell you, it depends on the brand. It depends on the type of controller. Some of these controllers can do that. Some of them can't. But I highly suggest that you check with your local ordinance to see if your county allows your smart controller to be considered for, as a rain shutoff device. Okay. Now, how do these irrigations, how do these smart controllers work? Where they are weather-based, right? So they get information on the internet, so you have to have Wi-Fi. It gets information from your local weather stations. It collects data, and they calculate the temperature from these weather stations, the rainfall, the amount of evapotranspiration, and then it sends the information to the controller and lets it know whether it should irrigate or not. You will go ahead and schedule your time on your timer, and you're on your controller, and you're gonna say, I want to water, Mondays and Wednesdays. Those are my days. However, if the weather station is forecasting that it's going to rain, and it has it for that half an inch that you're setting your controller for, it's not going to allow some of these controllers, let me say, will not allow it to rain. I will not allow it to come on. So I always say it's important to always have a rain sensor, because for those of you that have lived in Florida for a really long time, like my mom lives 10 minutes down the street from me, and she will call me and say, oh, it rained so much today, I had a bunch of water. And then I'm like, well, I'm 10 minutes away, I had not a drop of water. So it's very important that even though we have these smart controllers and we rely on these technologies, that we have something as a backup to make sure that we can shut it off. Now, rain sensors are a cheap way of doing that, very easy. Now you don't have to worry about the cables, like the ones that have a running cable, those will run you about $20 or so, not including the installation for labor unless you do it on your own. But we also have these wireless ones now, like on the right-hand side. And take a look at this photo, and I want you guys to put in the chat, which is the correct installation, your right or the left? Which one would you consider the proper installation of a rain sensor? So I'll give you a few seconds to put that in your in the chat as we move on to our next slide on soil moisture sensors. So soil moisture sensors work similar to a rain sensor, but they tell you how much water is actually in the soil because it is installed in the first 6 inches of the roots of your turf. Why is that important? Because I don't want to know how much water, rain came up through my roof. I want to know how much water is actually in my soil. I don't see these as much as I wish I could see them. I would see them in the field when we visit some of these properties because these are a little bit more accurate than your rain sensors. Toro does have one that is wireless, which I'm sure other companies do as well. But I know you've seen different brands throughout my presentation, so I want to make sure I kind of mention a little bit of everyone. And so the way these soil moisture sensors work is you put them in the first 6 inches of your root system. You put the flat back down. You're going to pour a bucket of water, and then it's going to provide the attachment to your controller a number of how much it's going to take to make sure that that soil is completely saturated. So here we have the number 8 on our screen. So in the morning, just like with your rain sensor, let's say it's sunny and your timer is going to come on. And so if it's really dry and this is below the number, let's say the max is 10 and it's at number 8, then this switch stays connected and it goes through the system and it allows the water to come through. However, the same happens if it's raining. The sensor sends a signal to this controller again. And if it's at 8 or 10 at the capacity, then what happens is that it sends a signal again. This switch unlocks, which means it doesn't allow the signal to come through. And so then you don't get any water to your valves. That's why I think these are a little bit more important than your rain sensors. But I hope to see these a little bit more in the field than we typically do now. This is a backflow device. These are required on a lot of your irrigation systems because people tend to fertigate or they use fertilizer through their irrigation system, and this prevents wash back into the potable water. So it's important that you have these on your systems, your irrigation systems. They are mandatory, at least in Miami-Dade, they're mandatory. And there are areas down south here where on the west side of town that we see a lot of homes that are stained with this iron red color. So homeowners buy this rust away tank, and they also use that through their irrigation system to prevent the staining on their home. So this will also prevent that from washing back into our water. So maintenance. Just like Florida-friendly landscaping, it doesn't mean no maintenance. Your sprinkler system also needs some maintenance. It's low maintenance, but no maintenance. So it's important to make sure that you're doing your wet checks. Inspect your systems monthly. Just take a quick walkthrough. Adjust your systems during our seasonal change, which is coming up now. Our wet season is coming up. Make sure that you're testing it annually. Make sure those rain sensors are working. And treat your irrigation like any other home system that you have that requires a routine checkup. So regular maintenance, that will save you water and your plants in the long run. Now, the landscape irrigation rebate program, we have one here in Miami-Dade. There are several throughout the state. We're hoping that there are going to be more throughout the state. These programs provide rebates. So if you see your county on the screen, the way these work is that you sign up to the program. Some have employees that will come out to your property for free and conduct an assessment on your irrigation system. They will provide you a report. Once you make the changes, they will go back out, verify the changes were made, and then you get a rebate. I would say call your county and see how yours works. That's how ours works. Our program, you're allowed to apply for up to 5 years for single family homeowners, and you can get a $500 rebate each year. We also cover large properties or sort of large commercial site properties like homeowner associations. We've done Walgreens, we've done a few Taco Bells. And you can, those large properties get about $2,850 in rebates. So check out your local county and see if they have any of these rebate programs. If they don't, you can also ask for it. So it's important. Extension is based on our community's needs. So if there is a need in your community for these types of programs, you are our voice. You will be the one out there promoting these programs and saying, I see a need in our county. How can we get these programs in our county? So you can visit your utility company. That's who we partner with. That's who funds our particular program now, is the Miami-Dade Water and Sewer Department. And they're the ones providing the rebate and also some of the funding for our employees here with an extension. So I just kind of wanted to show you a quick upgrade here. Like I mentioned before, this is a mechanical timer with your indexing valve. This is somebody who participated in our program and switched to a smart controller. You can see the device inside the smart controller that is connected to the internet. And they switch the indexing valve over to these electrical valves so that they can handle their system a little bit better. This particular homeowner, just kind of a client testimonial. I know we're kind of getting to our question time. This client testimonial, as you can see, they joined our program in June of 2018. You can see that their water bill was about $410. We went to their property and we recommended that they installed a smart weather-based controller, installed a rain sensor, even a flow sensor. What does a flow sensor do? Well, it knows how much water is coming through the pipe typically, and if the water goes above the typical norm, it will shut down that zone. Additionally, they removed some irrigation that they didn't need. And when we went back out, we made sure in July that everything was done appropriately. In September, they sent us a copy of their water bill, and it reduced to $173. So we're not only preaching about it, we're showing you that these things do work. As I mentioned, we are research-based. Here's a property, Bayview Condos in North Bay Village. This property, really quick, you can see that it was watering every day when we first showed up. Their current watering schedule was every day, 17 minutes for each zone. And what do we recommend? Switching it down to Wednesday to Thursday to Saturday, only 2 days a week. But what do you notice here? They did reduce their time here, but we recommended that they increase their time in zone 3 and 4. And why do you think that would be? Why would we decide, hey, these zones need a little bit more water? I'll let you put that in the chat and see why you think 3 and 4 need a little bit more water. I will tell you it's because these zones have turf. So we also not only look at the amount that they're watering, every time we're going out there, we're looking at what they're watering. So these may be typical planting beds, and where 3 and 4 is probably an a turf area. If you see here are the recommendations that they completed. They installed a smart controller. They did the rain sensor. They repaired a lot of leaks. This particular manager was very invested in our program. And because we couldn't access their water bills through Miami-Dade Water and Sewer because they have a separate utility company, he was calculating his water bills, and you can see here the usage before in 2022 and gallons, and then what they were using in 2023. And their average water savings within that year was about 68%, just with the few changes that they made with our recommendations. So with that, I would like to share with you that, of course, I do not do any of these programs by myself or this particular program. This is my team here. We have Dalton, Jesus, Kiara, Solina, who help with not only our Florida Friendly Landscaping program, but our Landscape Irrigation Rebate program, our Master Gardener program, our composting program, our rain barrel program. We have a lot of programs. So I'm very thankful for my team. So I want to give them a little shout out. And if you want to follow us and you want to take a look at what we're doing in Miami-Dade County, what webinars we're presenting, whether it's us or some of our master gardeners, you can scan that QR code and it will take you to all our social media so that you can follow us there.
Thank you so much, Laura. It was really informative and we really appreciate you sharing all that information with us. So I would like to invite anybody, if you have a question, to put it in the Q&A box. I know a lot of people were trying to answer Laura's questions in the chat box. It is disabled. Sorry about that, y'all, but we were trying to get y'all to put it in the Q&A box. And thank you for your participation in that. So we did have a few things that I wanted to mention. So I know we were talking about irrigation restrictions, and we all have them except for the Panhandle. So if you are not living in the Panhandle, your water management district has irrigation restrictions, and it is typically twice a week. And you have a specific day that you are supposed to be watering on, depending on your address. So I put in the chat box a link to a Gardening Solutions article that talks about irrigation restrictions, and it has a map so you can figure out which water management district you are in. And then I posted links to all of the irrigation restrictions for the different water management districts. And you'll notice that some of them have posted even stricter irrigation restrictions because of the drought. So some of them are down to one time a week. So if you are irrigating more than once a week in most of the state, you are breaking the water management restrictions. And I hope you paid attention how to adjust your timer or just turn on your system manually. I would also like to say one thing, Laura had a lot of really great programs down in Miami-Dade County. There's rebate programs. Not every county has those available, but one thing that is becoming more popular is irrigation evaluations, where extension agents or master gardeners will come to your house and run your irrigation system to check it for issues, whether that's overspray, whether that's a leak, whether that's running too long in certain zones. And so if you would like to find out more information about that, look for your county extension and search for irrigation audits. And quite a few counties in the state are starting to do those. So I was going to go to the Q&A box here and see if we have any more questions. So one one of the first ones that was put in here was how much does UF reach out to HOAs and developers to urge them to cut back on their regular watering and to switch from St. Augustine grass to FFO? This is we have a really great platform to approach homeowner associations rather than just informed homeowners. So do you work with HOAs, Laura?
Yes, we work with both homeowners and HOAs. I think, as Jeannie was asking, I think one of the things with these rebate programs, because we do have some funding, that's an incentive for them to want to make the change, right? They're not getting anything out of it. They don't want to do it. Some of them are using well water, so it's even harder to push them to switch over to smart controllers because they're not paying for the water. So we do have a big push here, and I do know a lot of the irrigation professionals throughout the state that are trying to help with these HOAs. But again, just like you can't control the HOAs and your HOA fee, because I'm in the middle of that, it's really difficult to get them to control their irrigation systems.
So one thing that I like to encourage people to do is your homeowners association is that's your association. You're paying the money to be a part of it. You're paying for those amenities. And so like don't think of the board as this like, oh, these people that you can't talk to or just an entity that's untouchable. If this is something that you're interested in, you have a county extension agent in your county, most likely, almost every county does, that can give presentations to the board, that can give information to your board. A lot of boards will have a landscape committee or an architectural review committee where some of the landscaping rules are. And that's something that as a resident in a homeowners association, you can bring to the attention of your board and reach out to county extension because they love doing presentations. It looks great on their year-end reports. I did this many presentations to this many homeowners associations, And this is the before and after water savings. Love it. So that's something that we really encourage people to do, is reach out to your county extension office to make a presentation to your board.
And Claire, I think FFL has a book for community associations, correct? You guys have a
Yeah.
printed book that is it available online for people to download and maybe hand it to their landscape associations?
We have some resources available. I will, maybe Angela can post that in the chat. We have on our website, it's called Make Your Community Florida Friendly. So on that website, we have sample irrigation contracts. We have model language that homeowners associations can use for their covenants, codes, and restrictions, or their architectural guidelines or their landscaping guidelines, things like that. And we do have a resource as well that kind of goes over all of these things for HOA boards, and then hopefully we'll be able to get that in the chat before we get out of here.
Great.
So here we go. Someone asked that say that they would like to share this with their HOA, just so everybody knows this presentation. All of these are recorded and they will be available on our website and our YouTube channel. And so in a few days, look for these to be posted. Okay, and it's just posted FFL for communities. It is in the chat for everybody to look for. Okay. Do we have to be concerned about the amount of water in the aquifers, i.e., if we are watering from wells that are tapping into them? Laura.
What is it? I'm sorry. I
I'm
was reading
sorry.
another
I'm sorry about
question.
that. It's okay. Do we have to be concerned about the amount of water in the aquifers if you're watering from wells, if your irrigation system is pumping from wells that
Yes,
tap into the aquifer?
100%. Yeah, especially during the drought, like April is our hottest month. Here, one of the biggest issues that you may run into, I don't know exactly where you live, but for the homeowners here on the east side, like in Coral Gables area on our east side, when they're pumping water out and there's not enough in the aquifer, what happens because they're so close to the ocean, then they start bringing in salt water into their wells. And once that well goes to salt, you can't use it anymore. And so then they have to switch over to potable water. And so it is important if you want to keep that water, that well healthy, is to make sure that you're looking at the levels of the water in the aquifer. So depending on where you're located, you can get that information from your local water management district. Keep an eye on it because if your well goes to salt, then you got to close it up and use something else.
Okay, I have kind of a technical question here that maybe you'd be able to answer. It says, I have a 7-zone well system. I am struggling to integrate raised bed drip irrigation into the system without overwatering the turf or underwatering the raised beds. Is that something
So
that you can help answer?
yeah, he's like, I have a 7-zone well. I'm struggling to integrate drip into the system without. Okay, so Rick, if you want to send me an email, I would be happy to look at your system. If you have maybe some photos of the different zones, because you say you have 7 zones, but I would need to see if those beds are currently being watered with the turf with your beds. If maybe we could put my email in the chat. I would be happy for you to send me some more details and I can help you figure that out.
Okay. Well, everyone, I just wanted to thank you all for your questions and thank you for participating. As I said, this is a technical topic, but it is so important to understand your irrigation system, understand your watering restrictions, and then understand, what we can all do to help conserve water, especially in this drought. So Laura, thank you so much for your presentation. Can we do your email? Hold on a second. Let me try to get your email into the chat before we get off of here. Give me 1 second, everybody.
No worries. While you're doing that, I see Art Gallo's comment. He said, hi, Claire. In my experience with smart irrigation systems, it makes no sense to limit watering to twice a week as an example because the algorithms are set to water based on many factors. This watering restrictions make it hard to justify the time and expense of moving to a smart controller if the owner can't water when the smart system requires irrigation. That is a good point. However, Setting it to 2 days a week, you know that you're not going to go outside of the restrictions if that is what your restrictions are in your area. I'm really hoping, and we have had talks with Miami-Dade Water and Sewer as to whether they would provide a variance for those homeowners that have an irrigation system. So Art, that may be something that you would want to, talk to your local government with, municipality, and say, hey, this would be important. If these are working this way, would this be something that you guys can provide a variance for?
That is a good advice. And thank you so much, everyone. Really appreciate you attending, and we will see you next month for our next homeowner webinar.
Thank you for having me.